The manager kicks out woman from luxury store, but he doesn't know that she's the new owner. The air inside. La Maison de Luxe tasted of ambition and old money, a cloying blend of expensive perfume and hushed expectations. Crystal chandeliers, each a miniature galaxy, scattered light across the polished marble floors, reflecting distorted images of the meticulously arranged displays. Handbags, each a testament to artistry and exorbitant pricing, sat perched like trophies on velvet pedestals. Seraphina Dubois hesitated just inside the entrance, the scent triggering a flood of memories. Her father's booming laughter echoing in the halls, the hushed reverence he both courted and secretly mocked. She wore a tailored black dress, intentionally understated, paired with practical flats, an armor against the judging eyes she knew she would face. He's still here, she thought, a knot tightening in her stomach. Her father's legacy is our burden. She glanced at her reflection in the glass of a display case, a ghost of the girl who used to run through these halls, dreaming of escaping this gilded cage. She pulled out her old phone and snapped a photo of the interior, a silent promise to herself. A figure approached, his gait precise, his smile a carefully constructed facade. Jean-Luc, the manager, a man whispered about in hushed tones, a gatekeeper of exclusivity, rumored to possess an uncanny ability to discern the worthy from the unworthy. "Good afternoon, madam," he greeted, his voice smooth as aged cognac. "May I assist you?" "Just browsing, thank you," Seraphina replied, her gaze sweeping over the meticulously arranged displays. She paused by a display of silk scarves, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns, the silence making her uneasy. Jean-Luc lingered, his smile hardening almost imperceptibly. "Are you certain? Perhaps you'd find something more suitable in one of the smaller boutiques nearby?" Seraphina raised an eyebrow, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "I assure you, I am perfectly capable of appreciating fine craftsmanship." "Of course," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "It's just that our clientele often appreciates a certain understanding of the value we offer." Value, she thought, or validation? This wasn't about luxury. It was about the illusion of belonging, carefully curated and fiercely guarded. "I understand," Seraphina said, deciding to play along for now. "I assure you, I intend to make a purchase." Jean-Luc's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing her from head to toe, lingering on her practical flats. "Very well, madam. Please do enjoy your browsing." He retreated, but Seraphina felt his gaze on her, a subtle pressure that tightened with each step. The air of exclusivity felt less like luxury and more like a carefully constructed barrier, designed to keep people like her, people who didn't conform to his narrow definition of wealthy, out. She had a feeling this visit was about to become a test, not just for Jean-Luc, but for herself. Seraphina picked up a delicate crystal perfume bottle, the scent of jasmine and sandalwood evoking memories of her mother, a woman who had embraced the elegance of La Maison de Luxe with quiet grace. The price tag, however, made her wince. Jean-Luc materialized beside her, his smile a predatory glint in his eyes. "That is a limited edition, madam. A true masterpiece." "It is beautiful," Seraphina acknowledged, turning the bottle in her hands. "But also, quite an investment." "Indeed," Jean-Luc agreed, his voice laced with a subtle challenge. "It requires a certain appreciation for the finer things in life." "And what if I were to accidentally drop it?" Seraphina tested, her eyes locking with his. Jean-Luc's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "One must always be careful with such treasures. Perhaps something less fragile would be more suitable?" "Are you suggesting I'm careless?" Seraphina asked, her voice laced with steel. "Not at all, madam," Jean-Luc replied, his eyes gleaming with barely disguised contempt. "Merely practical. We wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable." Seraphina placed the bottle back on the display, the click echoing in the silent space. He's enjoying this, she realized. This wasn't just about enforcing standards, it was about exerting power. Before Jean-Luc could press his advantage, a young woman, Sophie, One of the sales associates Seraphina remembered from her childhood rushed towards them, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and urgency. Monsieur Jean-Luc! Madame Devereux has arrived. She's requesting your immediate attention. Jean-Luc's entire demeanor transformed, the condescension melting away to reveal a sycophantic eagerness. Madame Devereux! Of course, of course. Excuse me, madame, he said to Seraphina, his voice dripping with false charm. My apologies, duty calls. He hurried away, leaving Seraphina standing alone, the sting of his dismissal still lingering. She watched as he greeted Madame Devereux with obsequious flattery, ushering her towards the private viewing room in the back of the store, the sanctuary of the elite. Seraphina clenched her fists, the injustice burning within her. This wasn't about preserving luxury. It was about reinforcing a system of exclusion, a system that her father had inadvertently perpetuated. She decided to confront the issue head-on. She made her way toward the back of the store, the rhythmic click of her heels echoing on the marble floor, each step fueled by a growing sense of resolve. As she approached the VIP room, she could hear Jean-Luc's voice, a sickeningly sweet blend of flattery and salesmanship. Madame Devereux, this sapphire necklace is simply breathtaking. It was crafted by artisans in Italy, and I believe it would complement your exquisite taste perfectly. Seraphina paused outside the door, her hand resting on the ornate handle, her heart pounding in her chest. Time to disrupt the illusion, she thought. She pushed the door open, stepping into the room, her presence shattering the carefully cultivated atmosphere of exclusivity. Jean-Luc and Madame Devereux turned to look at her, their expressions a mixture of shock and annoyance. Excuse me, Seraphina said, her voice clear and unwavering. I need to speak with Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc's face paled, his carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. Madam! This is highly inappropriate. Madame Devereux, please excuse us. He turned to Seraphina, his eyes pleading. Can we talk outside? No, Seraphina said, her gaze fixed on Jean-Luc. We'll talk here. In front of Madame Devereux. He swallowed hard, the desperation palpable. Madame Devereux, a woman who valued her time and influence, raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her silence a sharp reprimand. Seraphina knew she had to choose her words carefully. This wasn't just about confronting Jean-Luc. It was about challenging the entire system he represented. Jean-Luc seems to be having a bit of a difficult time understanding my needs as a customer. Seraphina began, directing her words towards Madame Devereux, her tone polite but firm. Perhaps you could offer some insight as a valued patron of La Maison de Luxe? Madame Devereux leaned back in her chair, a hint of amusement playing on her lips. Intriguing, she murmured. Please do elaborate. Seraphina turned back to Jean-Luc, her gaze unwavering. Tell me, Jean-Luc, what exactly is it about me that makes you believe I am not a suitable customer for this establishment? Is it my dress? My shoes? Or perhaps something more intangible? Jean-Luc stammered his carefully rehearsed excuses, dissolving into a jumbled mess. Madam, I assure you, it's nothing personal. It's simply store policy. Store policy? Seraphina challenged, her voice rising slightly. And what, pray tell, does this store policy entail? Do you have a list of approved appearances? A secret code to identify the worthy? Madame Devereux chuckled, a low, throaty sound. This is becoming quite entertaining, Jean-Luc. You seem to be in a rather precarious position. Jean-Luc shot a desperate look at Madame Devereux, then back at Seraphina, his face a mask of panic. He knew his career was hanging by a thread. Seraphina pressed her advantage. The truth, Jean-Luc. Tell us the truth. Why did you treat me with such disdain? He hesitated for a moment, then finally blurted out. I thought you were a threat to our image. I thought you would lower the tone of the store. Lower the tone? Seraphina repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. And what exactly is the tone you're trying to maintain, Jean-Luc? One of snobbery? Of exclusion? Of blatant prejudice? Madame Devereux raised her hand, silencing Seraphina. Enough, mademoiselle, she said, her voice sharp. This has gone on long enough. Jean-Luc, you are dismissed. Leave us. Jean-Luc looked at her in disbelief. But Madame Devereux. Leave, she repeated, her voice leaving no room for argument. Jean-Luc bowed his head and shuffled out of the room, his career seemingly in ruins. Seraphina turned to Madame Devereux, her heart pounding in her chest. I apologize for the scene, she said. I didn't mean to disrupt your shopping experience. Madame Devereux smiled a genuine, almost maternal smile. Nonsense, my dear. You did me a favor. I've suspected for some time that Jean-Luc was overly zealous in his duties. It's refreshing to see someone stand up to him. She paused, looking Seraphina in the eye. Tell me, mademoiselle, what is your name? Seraphina, she replied. Seraphina Dubois. Madame Devereux's eyes widened in surprise. Dubois? As in, the daughter of Henri Dubois? Seraphina nodded. Yes. He was my father. A look of understanding washed over Madame Devereux's face. I knew your father well, she said. He was a brilliant man. He would have been proud of you. She paused, then added, So, you're the new owner of La Maison de Luxe? Seraphina took a deep breath and nodded. Yes. As of this morning. Madame Devereux smiled. Well then, Mademoiselle Dubois, she said. I believe we have much to discuss. The conversation that followed was long and revealing. Madame Devereux shared her insights into the business, her concerns about Jean-Luc's management style, and her hopes for the future of La Maison de Luxe. She encouraged Seraphina to embrace her vision and to create a store that was both luxurious and inclusive. As they talked, Seraphina realized that she had found an unlikely ally in Madame Devereux, a woman who possessed both wealth and wisdom, a woman who understood the true meaning of elegance. You know, Madame Devereux said, leaning forward, I've been thinking about Jean-Luc. Firing him outright might be too harsh. He's made mistakes, yes, but he's also dedicated many years to this company. Seraphina was taken aback. But he was prejudiced and discriminatory. How can we possibly keep him on? Madame Devereux smiled knowingly. We don't have to keep him in his current position. But perhaps we can use his experience differently. Perhaps we can give him a lesson. Seraphina was intrigued. What do you have in mind? Madame Devereux explained her plan, a daring and unconventional idea that would not only punish Jean-Luc for his past behavior but also teach him a valuable lesson about empathy and understanding. Seraphina listened intently, her initial skepticism slowly giving way to excitement. Madame Devereux's plan was audacious, but it was also brilliant. It was a chance to not only right a wrong but to create real change. The next morning, Seraphina summoned Jean-Luc to her office. He arrived looking defeated and contrite, his eyes filled with apprehension. Jean-Luc, Seraphina began, her voice firm but fair. I've been thinking about your situation. And I've decided that I'm not going to fire you. Jean-Luc's eyes widened in disbelief. Really? But after what I did, I'm giving you a second chance, Seraphina continued. But it comes with conditions. You will be demoted from your position as manager and reassigned to a new role. What kind of role? Jean-Luc asked, his voice trembling. Seraphina smiled. You will be working as a sales associate in our new pop-up store in the lower-income district of the city. You will be interacting with customers from all walks of life, customers who may not fit your preconceived notions of wealthy or worthy. You will be serving them with the same respect and courtesy that you would show to Madame Devereux. Jean-Luc stared at her in stunned silence. But that's humiliating. Perhaps, Seraphina said. But it's also an opportunity. An opportunity to learn, to grow, to become a better person. An opportunity to understand that true value lies not in wealth or appearance but in the human spirit. She paused, looking Jean-Luc in the eye. Do you accept my offer? Jean-Luc hesitated for a long moment, his face a battleground of emotions. Finally, he nodded slowly. Yes, he said. I accept. Seraphina smiled. Good, she said. Then let's get to work. Jean-Luc's transition to his new role was anything but smooth. He struggled to adapt to the unfamiliar environment, the lack of luxury, and the diverse clientele. He made mistakes, he stumbled, and he often felt humiliated. But slowly, gradually, something began to change. He started to listen to the customers, to understand their needs and their struggles. He began to see them not as statistics or stereotypes but as individuals with their own unique stories. He learned that true elegance was not about expensive clothes or exclusive brands but about kindness, compassion, and respect. He learned that wealth was not a measure of worth but a tool that could be used for good or for ill. He also learned that his prejudices had blinded him to the beauty and richness of the world around him. One day, a young woman came into the pop-up store looking for a dress for her graduation ceremony. She was nervous and unsure, and she clearly couldn't afford to spend much money. Jean-Luc helped her find a beautiful dress that was both affordable and stylish. He treated her with the same courtesy and respect that he would have shown to Madame Devereux. As the woman was leaving, she turned to Jean-Luc and said, "Thank you. You made me feel so special. I'll never forget this." Jean-Luc smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He had finally understood the true meaning of his job. He wasn't just selling clothes, he was helping people feel good about themselves. He continued to work at the pop-up store for several months, learning and growing with each passing day. He became a valuable member of the team, earning the respect of his colleagues and the gratitude of his customers. One day, Seraphina visited the pop-up store. She watched Jean-Luc interact with customers, her heart filled with pride. After he had finished helping a customer, she approached him and said, "Jean-Luc, I've been watching you. And I'm impressed. You've come a long way." Jean-Luc smiled, his eyes filled with humility. "I've learned a lot," he said. "I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave me." Seraphina nodded. "I think you're ready for a new challenge," she said. "I'm offering you your old job back." Jean-Luc looked at her in surprise. "Really? But, after everything..." "I believe in second chances," Seraphina said. "And I believe that you've earned it. But this time, you'll be managing the entire company, not just one store. You'll be responsible for ensuring that all of our employees and customers are treated with respect and dignity." Jean-Luc smiled, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Seraphina," he said. "I won't let you down." Standing once again in her father's office, Seraphina watched Jean-Luc address the entire company, his words filled with sincerity and conviction. He spoke of his past mistakes, his newfound understanding, and his commitment to creating a truly inclusive and welcoming environment for everyone. Seraphina smiled, knowing that her father would have been proud. She had not only transformed La Maison de Luxe, but had also transformed Jean-Luc, turning him from a gatekeeper of exclusion into a champion of diversity. The challenges ahead would be significant, but Seraphina was ready. She had learned that true luxury was not about wealth or status but about kindness, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what is right. And the store was ready to embrace true diversity.